So here is the poster for today's event. It is a really very fortunate for us that we have 5 very known, well-known experts in the field. Of course, Dr. Pervez Hoodbhoy, everyone almost knows him everywhere, in the subcontinent, elsewhere. A very prominent civil rights activist, an eminent physicist in Pakistan. Mr. Qamar Agha, a very senior journalist, commentator, columnist in India, is a defense expert. Mr. Zahid Hussain is a senior journalist, and he quite often writes in Dawn and in other international journals and newspapers. Dr. Mohibul Haq is a professor in political science, Aligarh Muslim University, an expert on international affairs, and Dr. Syed Irfan Ashraf, who is a professor of journalism in Peshawar University, and he's a journalist, columnist, author, and he's from Pakistan. So welcome you all, and now the brief welcoming from Bina.
Ji, thank you so much, Razi Saab. The idea was not at all to beat up on you, ye ho jata hai bekhayali mein. And I thank you for inviting me to welcome, to open the event. It's an honor for me with such eminent speakers. And I will just apologize at the outset that I have another commitment, so I won't stay on till the end, but I will be here for as long as I can. Basically, as far as the issue is concerned of Talibanization and Afghanistan under Taliban rule and the impact on South Asia, I think everybody here knows that the biggest impact, the most tragic outcomes of this Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, the impact is felt by the women and girls of Afghanistan. That whenever I have heard, since after the Taliban takeover, the recent one, there have been several panels in which Afghan women have also been part of the panel and have spoken. And I have been completely awe-inspired by their courage and really moved by what they are going through. Many of them have had to flee the country. As you all know, especially judges and female politicians and people in the public eye. But there are many who have stayed behind. And in one particular case, I remember hearing them say that, we will do whatever it takes to improve the lot of the women in Afghanistan. We will beg the Taliban, we will work with the Taliban, we will, keep going. And they are determined to take their struggle further. The Afghan women are the strongest, most powerful women that I've ever come across. And maybe that is because of the adversity that they have faced, throughout these decades of war, particularly. But I think in general, I've noticed that Pakhtun women particularly, when they have educated Pakhtun women, as we say in Punjabi, unse dadi koi nahi hoti hai. They are really, because they really have to fight against so much to get what they want and what they need. And they have a right to their education. They have a right to not be invisibilized. They have a right to live as full human beings. And as you might all know, recently the Taliban said that, we will not, forced marriage will not be allowed and all of that. This is lip service because there is no forced marriage in Islam in any case. They claim to follow Islam. But anyway, the point I want to make in terms of South Asia, aapka topic hai, impact on South Asia. So the speakers are much more qualified than me to speak about this perhaps, but I will just say that one of the ways out of the fanaticism that we are seeing all around the region is to take a regional approach. And I think that is really essential in order to counter this Talibanization. And when I say Talibanization, it doesn't just apply to Afghanistan. There are Taliban, you can say that there are Taliban in all religions, which is those who are extremists or who are following aspects of the religion that have nothing to do with the spirit And we can see that, and Pervez Hoodbhoy actually has a brilliant article today in the Dawn about the Mutawa are coming. I don't know if I said that right, Pervez, but that, you know, what's happening in Pakistan right now, you all saw what happened just a couple of days ago with the Sri Lankan manager of a factory in Sialkot who was lynched and killed in the most brutal way on charges of quote unquote blasphemy. And this kind of, we are seeing elements of this across the region, and it is, we see echoes of this in Bangladesh. We see echoes of it in India with the way that the Muslims and Dalits in particular are being attacked and lynched and you know, like on charges of quote unquote blasphemy. In that context, in the context of India, it is about cow worship and how that is affecting communities. And overall, I want to just say that all of these aspects of, whether you want to call it fanaticism, Talibanization, some kind of aversion of fascism, this is all rooted in fear, in the fear of and the desire to impose a lifestyle on people, that, you know, you will look this way, you will dress this way, you will worship this way, and those who don't are liable to be, you know, subject to violence or to be killed. And that is the Talibanization we are seeing around the region. And that is why the region has to come together and fight this kind of Talibanization, which is, it's like a nine-pins thing, that if in Afghanistan we are seeing Pakistan and India fighting over their influence, spheres of influence in Afghanistan. And when they do that, it only emboldens the extremists in their own countries. So I'll just, that's the only context I wanted to set here. And I look forward to the discussion ahead, moderated by such eminent, by Pervez Hoodbhoy, such an eminent speaker, thinker and writer, and the other panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bina. And now, Pervez Hoodbhoy, it's your floor. Please
unmute yourself.
Is it okay now?
Yes.
Yeah. So, okay. Thank you very much, Razi Saab. I will be very brief because I want to pose 5 outstanding questions to which I would like the answer from the panelists if they would like to address them. Otherwise, the panelists are free to speak about whatever aspect of Afghanistan they want to address. My questions will be directly about the Taliban victory and its impact upon South Asia, upon geopolitics as well. So my first question is India out of the game now? India has invested quite a few $1 billion in Afghanistan, and it has built roads and hospitals and power plants and other infrastructure. It has been in a competition with Pakistan to win the hearts and minds of the Afghans. And it was perhaps winning with a fairly large section of the Afghan people. But ever since the victory, India has had to close down its embassy and all the consulates that earlier existed and which Pakistan had taken a very great objection towards. We noticed that the Taliban did not participate in the meeting which was hosted by India. I think it was on the 10th of November, so last month. There was Russia and Iran and 5 Central Asian republics there. But Pakistan boycotted it, said that India is the spoiler, and China then also boycotted it. So this, to my mind, is a question. Is India out of the game now? And my tentative answer is that perhaps, but not totally, and it will get back into the game. And one evidence that I see is that trucks are now going to be heading from Wagah towards Peshawar, towards the Khyber Pass, and these trucks will be loaded with foodstuffs, with grain, because Afghanistan, we all know, is in a desperate food situation. Now, earlier on, this wasn't possible. There were objections put by Pakistan to the trucks going across its territory, and eventually some kind of a compromise has been created, but probably under European and American pressure. So my first question is, how is India going to play its game now, and what is its game? So perhaps one of the Qamar Sahab or Mohibul Haq Sahab can address this later. My second question is the geopolitics of this part of South Asia being redefined by the Chinese-American rivalry? There is a great fear that now that the Americans have left, the Chinese are impatient to get in. They're seeing a huge amount of wealth in Afghanistan in terms of the minerals that exist over there, and they were only waiting for the Americans to get out of there. So, it was hoped that the vacuum which would be left by the Americans would be filled by the Chinese. So is this actually true or not? My own feeling is, and I could be wrong in this, that I don't think that the Chinese are coming in a big way. They do not want to get into a strategic rivalry with the United States in Afghanistan. They are not very keen about Afghanistan being under the Taliban because of the problems that this will create for China in terms of the terrorist groups that will naturally take refuge inside Afghanistan. And in particular, they're worried about the Uyghur Muslims who constitute, as they see it, a rebellious group inside China. They may be in a strategic rivalry with the Chinese are in a strategic rivalry with the United States over Taiwan. But Taiwan is something which is very close to China's heart, to its politics. Afghanistan is not. So, contrary to the common wisdom, I would maintain that the leaving of the Americans, their departure is not going to be filled by the Chinese. And so there need not be that level of alarm which is being evidenced in some quarters. But this is a question that I would love to see thrashed out in greater detail. My third question is, and I say these questions are as much to myself as to the others, as to everybody, in fact. Will the Afghan Taliban continue to be a client of the Pakistani military establishment? After all, there is no doubt that Quetta and Peshawar were major centers of the Taliban leadership, where there was a Quetta Shura and there was a Peshawar Shura. And this is where the Pakistani intelligence agencies were able to nurture the Taliban, and so they naturally had a master-client relationship there. Will this continue to hold or not? The reason that I feel that this is an open question is because there is a severe economic crisis here in Pakistan. The rupee is being rapidly devalued. The inflation has hit something like 18%. Pakistan is going to the IMF asking for loans, and it simply does not have the wherewithal to aid Afghanistan. And so its strategy has been to appeal to world conscience and say the Afghans are starving, and so it expects the world to feed the Afghans, not its own client state. So then this does become a very genuinely interesting question. Normally, it is the dog which wags the tail. But sometimes, the tail can wag the dog. For example, in the case of Israel and the United States, of course, the big power, the dog is the United States, Israel is the little tail, but you see how deep an influence Israel has on the United States. So here also, the assumption that the Taliban will obey, the Afghan Taliban will obey the Pakistani military establishment because they are indebted to it, is an assumption that needs to be explored. So that was my third question. My fourth question is, will the TTP, the TTP stands for Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, and this came into existence around 2005, 6, 7. I think Dr. Ashraf will tell us more because he's been he was actually with Maulana Fazlullah and was then a journalist covering the rise of the Swat Taliban. So my question is, will the TTP assert itself inside Pakistan, and will the Taliban victory re-energize it? As we see at the moment, the government seems to be quite desperate in wanting negotiations with the TTP. Now, the TTP is an openly terrorist organization. It's known for bloodbaths. These are the people who carried out the slaughter, the massacre of something like 130 children at the army public school in Peshawar. The government of Imran Khan is very sympathetic to them. In fact, Imran Khan had suggested way back in 2013 that the Afghan Taliban, that the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, TTP, be invited to open offices inside Pakistan. And this was at a time when they were committing suicide attacks upon Pakistani civilians, Pakistani police, Pakistani army. So what happens now, and what about the Afghan victory's impact upon other religious forces in Pakistan? In particular, the Tehreek Labbaik Pakistan, the TLP, which has suddenly out of the blue emerged as a large political grouping centered around the blasphemy issue. And they had Islamabad paralyzed for a very long time. Just recently, they demand the expulsion of the French ambassador, cutting off Pakistan from Europe. And Imran Khan is very sympathetic to them. Where is this taking us now? And my final question will be a little away from South Asia. It will be direct. I mean, it will be about South Asia, but it will be directly about Afghanistan. And I hope Zahid, when he joins us, will be able to answer this, but I think Ashraf would also be glad to. We have something like 300,000 Afghans who have fled Afghanistan recently, since the Taliban victory, which was 15th of August, so 3 months ago or so. Most of these people were highly qualified. They were doctors, engineers, technicians, health workers, teachers, professors, people who could maintain various parts of the infrastructure, and now they're gone. But are there enough remaining to have Afghanistan run again if the Taliban somehow loosen their restrictions? So Afghanistan is now drained of people who can run the system. So my question is, are there still enough people who can run the country? After all, the Taliban cannot. This is a militia. Their leaders have no clue about running the country. They don't have technicians. They don't have teachers. They don't have people who can keep the electricity system running. They don't have people who can keep the phone system running. For this, they will have to get people from the Middle East, from Qatar or whatever. And so my question will be, how will Afghanistan run now? I'll stop over here and request the other panelists to take over. And can we have people muted, please?
Yeah, we are okay to go ahead. Sorry.
I think Qamar Saab, I think you should just take it.
I think we should take up the fifth question first, because that deals with Afghanistan. And then we should come to Pakistan and then South Asia. In that order, it would be better. I don't know. I mean, you must talk to Pervez if he agrees. So I have the honor of meeting Pervez Hoodbhoy in Delhi.
Sorry, I was muted.
I met you in Delhi with Praful Bidwai and Achin Vinayak, you know. We were part of a CNDP when you had come long time. Anyway,
Yes. Yeah.
Anyway, so I think I should take up the fifth question first, and then come your first question should be addressed in the last, because that deals with the regional issues. First the Afghanistan, and then Pakistan situation, and then we come to South Asia in the last. That would be better. You see, three things I just want to make clear. Taliban are basically a Pashtun militia and Islamic fundamentalist. And thirdly, they have their own version of Islam, their own vision for Afghanistan, which we have seen in the past when they captured power in 1996 to 2001. And they are basically zealots. They cannot change. You cannot change them, no matter what they have agreed or signed with Americans or others, or what they are talking, you know. Maybe top leadership, some of the leaders within the organization, they wanted that way. Yes, Mullah Umar's group, Mullah Brother, was trying. I mean, they were very friendly with Americans even before also. They have dealt with Americans. So the Haqqani network also dealt with in the past also. I remember Mullah Umar's group has promised to bring oil and gas from Turkmenistan, you know, Unicol project they were working on. They were frequently visiting America. meeting State Department officials. Later they change, So these are the groups, they're beyond any change, you cannot bring in the change. Secondly, as you mentioned, they don't have people to run the country. They have no, and besides this, they are opposed to modernization. They are opposed to women's participation in politics or education or anything. They're it's a, Deoband is not a new movement. It is more than 200 years old. It was founded more than 100 years ago. It's a mindset, and they have been preaching this in the entire subcontinent. It's not only in Pakistan, it's in India and Bangladesh also. We have seen they have big following about it. And so the way they're basically on their way is to wage jihad and capture power. And their jihad means, that is terror, create a terror and then capture power. This is what they have been doing. And this is the general practice of all other Islamic organizations, be it Wahhabi, Salfi, like Al-Qaeda or for that matter, ISS also, they follow, or Tehrik-e-Taliban, Pakistan, all of them, follow the same path, the same style of functioning. So secondly, they don't have much support in the country. Last time when they come to power, Pashtuns were either silent. They were not opposing. Only Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara, they were, and some other minorities were part of the Northern Alliance. They were opposing and fighting with them. But this time the Taliban youth, the Pashtun youth is also not with them. Maybe they have some support in the villages, but in urban centers, most of the people are opposed to them. And thirdly, Pashtun nationalism is also, we could see, growing. At the moment, they have suppressed it. We saw the large number of demonstrations, not only in Kabul, but most of the cities have come out with the flag in their hands. Even the women were marching. It was basically started by the women and then followed by the men. So there are big resentment among the people of Afghanistan, and they will not accept, because the Afghans see that this is Pakistan's proxy. Pakistan has captured power. Afghanistan has always feared from Pakistan. When Pakistan came into being, at that time they opposed the formation of Pakistan. They said that the state has established in the name of Islam, and one day this problem will come to Afghanistan also. They were fearing, they had this fear long. And this is what happened in the end, that Afghanistan, Pakistan's meddling in Afghanistan, they see, in the name of Islam. I don't want to go in detail, the Pakistan policy of strategic depth and how to reach Central Asia and Afghanistan. So Afghan nationalism is now, Pashtun nationalism particularly, is growing. And among the minorities, they don't have support, whether it is Tajik, Uzbek, Hazara. But at the same time, the regional powers, India or all these countries, nobody wants to disturb Afghanistan at the moment. Neither the Afghans want a civil war. So they have given a chance. How long Taliban will have this chance? Another important thing. Now, first they said they have established an interim government. But this interim government is very permanent, because they say that the legitimacy of the regime comes from the mullahs, from the clerics, which means they will not go for elections. So they will remain in power. The legitimacy lies with a handful of mullahs who are part of the Deoband Tehreek. That's all, they don't care about others, whether the liberal Islamist mullah or the local people are not being consulted like any. So they have virtually established a state, a government or a state, like one of those, they don't call it Amirul Mominin, they call it Chief commander or something, but basically he's an Amirul Mu'minin or a caliph type of situation they have created for him, but they're not talking much about it. So these are the things, I would like to make in initial comments, this was the 5th question, and later I'll take up again, I don't want to give a big lecture or something, because I'm not used to it. I would like to listen more about our Pakistani colleagues, what they're saying.
So Irfan, can you take up can you go to the next question or whatever you would like to talk about?
I think let's discuss this one first.
Okay.
Unmute yourself.
Unmute.
Yeah.
I am unmute now.
Yeah,
Can I talk?
Good.
Yeah. So Qamar Agha Sahab said that, mentioned Taliban as Pashtuns and Pashtun nationalism and all. It's also a debate here in Peshawar. I'm just sitting here in Peshawar, just 40 kilometers from the Afghanistan's border. And it is mostly a debate among the Pashtuns here also. And when we use the word Pashtun for the Taliban, it always remains a question for us, because Pashtun basically are believing in two kinds of things. One is speaking Pashto, and another is doing Pashto. So mostly we, in our course, like when we live according to the Pashto code as Pashtun Wali, or doing Pashto. So Taliban mostly speak Pashto. They might speak Pashto. Most of them prefer to speak Arabic, by the way. But I think associating them with Pashtun culture or Pashtun Wali would be too much. Pashtuns don't chop the heads of people and then play football with them, while the Taliban is doing it on a regular basis as one form of their strength, using their strength. So when it comes to the Taliban, we need to understand this phenomena in a particular context of the Cold War politics in this region, the institutionalization of madrasa culture here, the coming into form of the the Saudian dollars and dollars from the US, the making of a syllabus by the American universities here, Nebraska or others, and how this perverted form of identity was created then could lead you to the Arab culture before Islam, or whatever, even now if the same practices are there. But you will not find such practices within the Pashtun culture. So you can trace the identity of Taliban to most of these madrasas on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border, which is then nurtured and protected by the state of Pakistan or by the charity coming from the UAE and other Gulf countries. But I think it would be very inorganic to say that they are Pashtuns basically, and I think they would feel offended themselves, the Taliban, if you call them Pashtun, because they don't believe in Pashto. They don't believe in nationalism. They don't believe in for us as Pashtun, the Afghanistan's flag is very sacred. We know it has a long history, but just you see what the Taliban did to the Afghanistan's flag. They don't even recognize it. And just I will give you one example. Look at the Pashtuns in the I think 1 or 2 weeks ago, there was a tournament in cricket matches in UAE. And did you find anyone holding the Taliban flag? They were all holding the flag, including the Afghan team, the flag of the Afghanistan. And that was really what we all hold, like we show loyalty towards the Afghan flag. And so I would say that we need to be clear about using a lens, and the lens should be not to associate any kind of value with the Taliban, which they don't deserve or which they don't really, I think, believe in. I think this was just what I wanted to say. But if there is another take, because this is often confused, Pashtun nationalism is confused with the Taliban, and it becomes like, takes the discourse in a very different direction.
Agha Sahab, you are muted.
Can I say just one
please go ahead.
sentence? when I said Pashtun nationalism, I didn't mean the Taliban are becoming a nationalist. I said that the nationalism is growing among Pashtun population, Pashtun people in Afghanistan who are opposing Taliban. And that's why they have made the flag as their symbol of unity, you know, wherever, whether they are in America or whether they are in UAE or wherever they are, you know, all over the world, when they go out and protest, you know, they deliberately bring this flag, the Pashtun flag. This is what I just a small correction. I'd like to listen others.
Yeah,
well, thank you very
much for correction. But why I responded, because there was something like Taliban are Pashtuns.
No,
Now
I'm sorry.
They're not Pashtuns anymore. There is, according to Pervez Hoodbhoy, there are Hazara Taliban also. There is Taliban from the Uzbeks as well.
Talibanization process which is going on in not only in your country but the region, you know, it's not confined to Pakistan. Thanks to Ziaul.
Actually, it's not according to me. It's what I read in the Washington Post. And the reason you have Hazara Taliban is because they are so scared that they'll be massacred again. And so some of them have gone to the lower levels of the Taliban hierarchy. It's not that they want to, but they want to protect themselves.
But then it connects with another question, that do you think that those Taliban which speaks Pashto, they want to become Taliban? Just look into the circumstances in 2008 when the Taliban emerged. They imposed restrictions on the houses. Every house was supposed either to give them money in the Pashtun belt or to allow one youngsters from their house to join the Taliban ranks. So I think there are a lot of compulsions under which we need to understand, particularly the state system, the ongoing wars here, the madrasa culture. If Taliban comes to your house and wants to offer them anything, you have to offer them anything. Even you cannot deny them having your child from them. Otherwise, they will then kill everybody in that sense. So I think we need to understand them in that context.
You're absolutely right. And I think that if there was an election, the Taliban would not win the election. They would get certainly more votes in the countryside than in the cities. But of course, they do have a base, and that base comes from appealing to a very primitive idea of justice. But now let's get Professor Mohibul Haq into the discussion.
Thank you, Pervez Sahab. With your portion and with the observations of Beena Sarwar Sahaba, the tone has been set. Basically, I'm more interested in the narrative or the discourse that Taliban's victory in Afghanistan has generated. Of course, I'll be addressing the question that Pervez Sahab has put. Basically, you see, there are many layers of realities that we are seeing. And I don't want to be myopic by saying that this is, I don't want to be reductionist. There is one reality that we know, that material reality, that we know Taliban has ruled over Afghanistan for 5 years, and what was the situation over there. And on the basis of that, we have assumed that this Taliban is also going to do the same thing. And then they are hot-headed religious extremist people. That is one layer of reality. Number two, the discourse that has generated is they are freedom fighters who have fought against imperialist onslaught on Afghanistan, and they are local collaborators in Afghanistan. The third that you will find is that they are anti-democratic people who have toppled a legitimate government that was there in Kabul, and by force they have taken over Afghanistan. I have never traveled to Afghanistan or Pakistan, and Irfan Sahab or Pervez Sahab, they know better than, of course, me and Qamar Agha Sahab, senior journalist. But you see, when we talk of this, this is a reality that there was imperialist onslaught on Afghanistan, whether it was Soviet imperialism or whether it was American imperialism. For last 40, 42 years, Afghanistan has been the victim of colonialism and imperialist exploitation. That is one thing. Within Afghanistan, there are many, many forces that we know. The second thing that, you know, what Aristotle says, that what a thing is right now, that is not important, what it is going to become in the best possible circumstances, that is very important. What what is going to be the final culmination of this Taliban that has taken over Kabul right now. And here we find that these are the people, those who don't believe in democracy at all. Progressive spaces within Afghanistan that will shrink, that is shrinking. All the apprehensions that were expressed by the learned panelists, they are very much there. But at the same time, when Pervez Saab is asking what is going to be the impact on South Asia and what India is going to do, I will say that South Asia, the country that should be worried most of all is Pakistan, because you are sharing the longest border with Afghanistan, and the Pakistan, as it tries to project Afghanistan as its backyard. At the same time, there are sympathizers. There are people who admire Taliban. There is already a very strong Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan. So ultimately, when Pakistan should be worried, because especially democracy in Pakistan, that will face threat. The people, because people there will be emboldened that military victory can be there against the democratic dispensation. You see, the very essence of democracy is freedom of expression, protest, and all. And what Tehreek-e-Labbaik has done, the democracy has been just put on ransom by them by using democratic means itself. So this kind of manipulation that this kind of populist groups can do, that we can understand. Thirdly, we should also keep in mind that after 9/11, the scenario is already very much in favor of this kind of forces in most of the Muslim countries. Basically, the people, those who talk of democracy today, the people, those who talk of human rights, peace, or the rights of women, gender sensitization, gender sensitivity, all these people are basically declared by others as stooge of the Western countries. The people, those who are not believing in our own system. This is the reason that the narrative that it is generating, the discourse that it is generating, that is more important. And how Pakistani society is going to address it is not a threat to India at all. In India, it is not going to be a threat to Taliban. India's concern is only that the soil of Afghanistan should not be used for anti-India, terrorism and all, because the Kandahar hijacking is already fresh in the mind of the people in India. So that is why there is genuine concern. Of course, in other countries, Bangladesh or Maldives, again, it is not going to play a major role. But when we are talking about South Asian countries, Sri Lanka, or you see then Nepal and Bhutan, nothing. But at the international level, of course, the rise of Taliban, the victory of Taliban, there are many people who are trying to read divine intervention, divine guidance, divine blessing, and because of which, these people have won. So that discourse is something that is to be, which has been constructed, and that is to be deconstructed. It is the responsibility of the progressive intellectuals and the liberals, those who believe in democracy, those who believe in spaces. Qamar Agha Sahab is, of course, our senior, but, I fail to understand, so, with due respect, that how Taliban is most of the time found to be connecting with the Deoband movement. Deoband movement, to me, as I understand the three main pillars of Deoband movement today, most of the time Deoband movement is criticized for, talking about spirituality and the religion, but not talking about this world. Other worldliness they prefer. And the political, if you see the political ideology that has emanated from the Deoband is composite nationalism of Hussain Ahmad Madni, Muttahida Qawmiyat. And where, and he himself is saying that qawmein jo hai, wo watan se banti hain, deen se nahi banti. Allama Iqbal ka pura rebuttal aapke samne hai, wo bhi ke wataniyat unki nazm ya Hussain Ahmad Madni ke khilaf. Ya फिर आप कासिम नौनाथवी को ले लें या मौलाना इलियास को ले लें, ये सारे जो लोग हैं, इनका कोई भी ताल्लुक इस तरह की फोर्सेस से जिसे आप कह रहे हैं तालिबान, या इनका कोई पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा भी नहीं था. और जो पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा, वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट हुसैन अहमद मदनी, उनका पॉलिटिकल एजेंडा जो था वो ultimately that was a very good composite culture that he wanted to maintain in this country, and that is why he opposed Pakistan, creation of Pakistan or creation of a state in the name of religion. So ultimately Qamar Agha साहब अगर उसको जरा यानी एक्सप्लोर करें तो बहुत अच्छा रहेगा, हमारे लिए बहुत एनलाइटनिंग होगा. And there are many questions that we cannot take up right now because that will be too lengthy. There are other learned speakers, so I will wait and then I will explore other things. Thank you.
I think Zahid Saab has joined, so.
Yes. I think, yes, Mohib Saab, I think you've raised a very valid point. There is a lot of triumphalism among those people who say that just a militia was able to defeat a superpower. That superpower put in $2 trillion. They had all the equipment in the world, but faith triumphed over technology. And so this is empowering radicals of all kinds across the world, but particularly here in Pakistan. And this is something that is very, very worrying. But now that Zahid has joined us, perhaps he would like... Zahid, there were 5 questions that were posed. You may want to address any of them. One was, is India out of the game? Second is the geopolitics of South Asia being redefined by the Chinese-American rivalry. Third question was whether the Afghan Taliban will continue to be clients of the Pakistani military establishment of the ISI. Fourth was about TTP and whether it is now going to re-emerge as a powerful force. By the way, here I'd specifically like you to address whether Imran Khan sees TTP and TLP or both as being his potential political allies in case if he has need for it. And the fifth question was about whether Taliban can survive given all the issues it has. But okay, you are free to speak whatever you feel you can most effectively address. So, Zahid.
Let me actually, a few things. I was just hearing the other speaker, and one thing, let me make it clear that the Afghan flag was not a Pashtun flag. Where one should be very clear about it. That means the former government has and is still being in use. So it was not actually Pashtun. So it's I think probably this should not be. It's not a correct thing to do. Say. And I think Pashtun nationalism. There was also somebody mentioned about Pashtun nationalism. So in fact, actually, 2 things I will make it. I think I would like to shed a light on that. Number one, actually, that yes, actually, predominantly Taliban are a Pashtun dominated movement, but now they have expanded. And they have actually, I've written about it quite a lot actually, that not 25% of the leadership members, the membership of Leadership Council of Taliban comprises non-Pashtuns. So in a way, actually, it's a kind of, it cannot be cannot say that it's purely a Pashtun movement. There's like the military chief of Taliban government is non-Pashtun. He's a Tajik. And so I think probably I just want to make those points clear. The other thing is that about, geopolitics affecting the region. Yes, actually, that has the changing situation in Afghanistan will have a huge impact on the geopolitics. And particularly when we see in the context of China, American-China rivalry, it's going to that actually impact. The other thing is that is India out of the game? No, it cannot be cannot be completely ruled out of the game. India has influence in Afghanistan for a very long time. It's a different kind of influence. It may be actually isolated at the moment because they did not have any link with the Taliban. And in fact, actually, there's a debate going on in India that whether they have made a mistake by not actually making any contact with the Taliban. So I think probably it is still to be seen actually. That other question is very important. That I never have been in and out of Afghanistan during first Taliban government, and I have been following the development there. Two things. Number one, actually, yes, actually, the Taliban have been dependent to some extent to Pakistan, but it cannot be said that they are the client of Pakistan government. They are not. In fact, actually, if you see over the last 20 years during this war against American forces, Taliban have developed good links with other countries too. Like, for example, many of the Taliban top leadership had been residing in Iran. Iran is the one country where the Taliban had almost gone into war during 1990s, but now they have equally good relations with Iran, and they are also actually have relationship with Russia and China. So yes, actually, they will listen to Pakistan, no doubt about that. But one should not expect that they will be dictated by the ISI and they'll be controlled by the ISI. It never happened and it will not happen. They have the choice, and in fact, actually, the most dramatic change which has taken place, relations between Iran and the Taliban government. Since Taliban government has come to power, the oil supply to Taliban government has doubled. And in fact, actually, that is one of the reasons why there's no shortage of fuel in Afghanistan at this point of time. So the regional countries have their own reason to have relationship with the Taliban. Russia's main concern, Russia has been supplying arms and financial support to the Taliban during this war against American forces for the reason. And that was actually the rise of Daesh in northern Afghanistan. And that was the major concern of Russia. Same is for China. China is also very concerned about the presence of ETIM, this organization in Afghanistan. And that's what actually they want the Taliban to take action. So I think probably it's a very complicated situation, but Taliban are not that isolated as they were in 1990s. The reason is very simple, that stake is very high for all the regional countries. If the system completely collapses or gone, like there's a renewed civil war in Afghanistan, it will have direct bearing on all the regional countries. And they're all actually fearful of one thing, that a kind of complete lawlessness in Afghanistan will actually allow the militant group, the other terrorist group, to occupy the territory. And that is the biggest fear of all the country. So I think probably that makes actually the huge dilemma for the Western countries, how to deal with the Taliban government. Now coming to the TTP. I think probably somebody said that TTP will gain ground. No, I don't think that. Look, actually, if you see, TTP has, yes, actually, they had control at one point, the tribal belt of Pakistan, which are now annexed into the main territory. At that point, still actually, they had actually, and there were military operation. Because of the military operation, those areas were cleared. And actually, most of the Taliban TTP leaders actually fled to Afghanistan, and they have been operating from there. But even then, actually, they have never been able to mobilize support from Pakistan. Their presence was limited to certain areas of Pakistan, but they have never become a kind of organization having a mass basis or the support, political support. So yes, actually, the new situation has actually raised certain question about Pakistan. There has been talk about the negotiation with the TTP, but I don't think that is going to go anywhere for two reasons. Number one should understand that the TTP is not a monolithic group. It is divided in various factions after it was actually forced out of tribal areas. There are about 6 groups operating, the 6 TTP groups, and some of them had already joined for a long time, joined the Daesh in Afghanistan. In fact, actually, Daesh in Afghanistan was largely comprised the TTP dissident group. There are 2 or 3 other groups. there's one group which is called Gul Bahadur Group, which is basically a kind of, originally was part of the TTP, but they left the organization long time ago. They were more interested in fighting in Afghanistan rather than Pakistani forces. But after military operation in Northwestern, they were forced to leave, to flee to Afghanistan. So they're there. And even in Afghanistan, yes, actually, that's correct, that some of the TTP groups of factions had been closely associated with the Afghan Taliban, Afghani group, and there were other Nazar Qayyum, and there were some other commanders. But even actually, one should also understand how it worked. It is not like like they were directly associated with the Taliban, Afghan Taliban. In fact, actually, they had nothing to do with the Kandhari group. Which is basically in southern Afghanistan. The present TTP's presence is only in eastern Afghanistan, which is dominated by the Afghan faction, Afghan Taliban faction of Haqqani group, and there's some others. So in fact, actually, their TTP's relationship is not with the central command of Afghan Taliban, but actually the commanders, Taliban commanders, which have been operating autonomously within the framework of Taliban movement, they have the association with the Haqqani group and some other commanders. So in fact, actually, this is the situation. But I know for some facts actually, about what the negotiation was. That negotiation cannot go anywhere. Quite a lot of them are criminals which wanted actually to, like for example, I know some of them have demanded that they should be returned those mines that they have been controlling in Northwestern and Southwestern, and that's what they want. And some of the conditions they have put forward, that's not acceptable. And I think probably this is both Pakistan is also biding time actually to negotiate, because Afghan Taliban feel that they have some obligation to a TTP also and to the Pakistani, and that they want actually this negotiation to take place. But if it fails, actually, I don't think there will be anything that could. So this fear of TTP gaining ground in Pakistan, that's not actually based on any fact. Even in the time actually when they had control over many areas, they could not get that kind of public support as some other extremist organizations have in the country. So yes, actually there will be a direct effect on Pakistan somehow about that with the Taliban coming to power in Afghanistan. But at the moment, I don't see that. And jubilation, somebody has mentioned about the jubilation or triumphant feeling in Pakistan. It's largely because it's not because because of Taliban had come to power. It's largely because they feel that a superpower has been defeated. So I think probably there are concerns. Certainly, there are concerns that whatever happens in Afghanistan will have a direct bearing on Pakistan. And there's also a huge concern about if the situation worsens in Afghanistan, if humanitarian situation worsens in Afghanistan, and the whole system collapses. And I think there will be huge flux of refugees. And probably when we talk about the Taliban, I think for Pakistan, that is basic. This is not only a concern of Pakistan, but entire international community. That actually, like for example, humanitarian collapse, like about 92% of Afghan population by 2022 will be below poverty line. Only 5% of Afghan.
Zahid Saab, sorry for interruption. Yes. Pervez Saab, would you please manage the time? Because we see, because you posed 5 questions and we would like you to manage the time, please.
Sorry, you are on mute. My internet is very wobbly today. I hope you can hear me. Yeah. Zahid, that was amazingly comprehensive. Thanks very much. You've covered a lot of ground. Now, can we see if the other panelists agree with you on your assessment? And in particular, about the impact of the Taliban victory on Pakistan? You said that it's there, but it's not something really to be worried about. So, Mohib Saab, what do you say?
Zahid Saab, it was very enlightening observation that you made, and of course I have learned a lot. Basically, what I wanted to put here that it is not only Pakistan, but you see that the victory of Taliban should be also understood in the context of what it is going to culminate into. Finally, after some time, you will find the Taliban keeping in view their ideological roots. They are going to, call themselves as Khalifa. Khilafat, the revival of Khilafat will be their aim. And if they don't do this, there will be internal contradictions within Taliban. Because, if you are trying to have a normative value of Islam to reconstruct Afghanistan, that cannot be ignored. And here, the moment they talk of this kind of revival, what will happen that you see why there was a lot of coverage all over the world, even the serious TV channels in prime time discussion, they were talking about Taliban. It is not only because of the atrocities that they had committed in the past. Basically, the post-Westphalia model of international system is under threat when these kind of forces are rising. Zahid was rightly saying that it is not only a Pashtun force and it has nothing to do with sub-nationalism that is called Pashto nationalism. And I'm very much, in agreement with that. Why? Because you see the Taliban that was consisting after 9/11, when there was a war with America, people from all over the world, they were in Taliban, and they were taken to Guantanamo Bay or the secret prisons where they were punished like anything. But basically the territorial nation-state system that we have got, where the nation-states have got the right to monopolize means of violence, they have got to in the international system, the states are recognized as the unit. This kind of ideology, whether this ideology of Taliban or even in Afghan Muslimin, it has nothing to do with nationalism. I'm saying not patriotism. Patriotism is there, that is natural. But nationalism is a political ideology. And this kind of ideology, whether it is Taliban or other Islamists, they always are going to be in conflict with nationalism, invoking Islamic universalism. So that is why finally it is going to culminate into one. And this is my prediction. And the second thing, and if they are not going to do this, if they are not trying to base their institutions with the Islamic nomenclature, they are not going to be acceptable to their own people. That will create internal contradictions within Taliban. And that will be problematic for them. So that is why they have to be populist, and they have to legitimize their rule. They have to legitimize their violence as well in the name of Islam. And the moment that you bring Islam into question, you bring Islam into this space, ultimately Khilafat will be the final culmination. And under this kind of circumstances, because of this, you will find that the international community, especially when Francis Fukuyama said that there is end of ideology and the final ideological evolution of man is over with the triumphant of with the triumph of democracy and liberal democracy, that comes under threat with this kind of ideology. So the ideological moorings are important. And the second thing that India is not out of game. Why? Because in near future, you'll find Iran is going to feel uncomfortable with China, and through Iran, of course, India, very soon you'll find that with other Central Asian countries, again, India has very good relations, and ultimately because of that, in the neighborhood, India has very good reputation at all. And within Afghanistan also, I saw the students, those who were coming to Aligarh Muslim University on the scholarships of India, they were talking very positive about India, about Indian films, about Indian culture, about Indian tradition and everything. So that acceptability I have seen while talking to Afghan students on our MU campus. And lastly, I will say that, Russia will never tolerate that this kind of ideology is exported outside the border of Afghanistan, because that will create problem for 6 republics, which are Muslim majority republics there. So neither China nor Russia will feel comfortable with this kind of ideology. Why? Because in China, again, there is Xinjiang province where there is already a movement is going on. So that is why the unity of opposites cannot be achieved in that region. And this is the reason that you'll find that many pulls and pressures will be there. And I don't know how Taliban is going to manage it.
Pervez, if you give me 2 minutes, I just want to clarify some of the things which the speaker has just said. Number one, actually, one should understand the difference between Taliban and Daesh. Taliban are a very retrogressive ideology, no doubt about that. There's a but basically they don't have a transnational interest or ambition. And the Khilafat, there is not, they do not want actually Khilafat to be established in the country, is the Daesh philosophy. And one should be very clear about all those different militant groups were operating. And I think probably Taliban are do not have that kind of transnational ambition. And that's one of the reasons when Americans were negotiating with the Taliban, that was one of the reasons why they did actually make a deal with the Taliban. So that's also one of the reasons why the Russians have been cooperating with the Taliban to certain areas, that they believe actually that the Daesh, which is the major threat, which basically has that transnational ambition rather than the Taliban. Thank you.
Let's go on to Professor Qamar. But just one comment. You notice that, Mohib Sahab, you notice that Haibatullah calls himself Amirul Momineen, but not Khalifa. So this is actually quite ambiguous because Hazrat Umar was both Amirul Momineen and Khalifa. Here, the Taliban want to emphasize that they are different from Daesh, as Zahid was saying, that they don't have transnational ambitions. So they want to capitalize on that and they want to get recognition from the world precisely on that one point. Ji, right. Can you comment now and unmute yourself first? Unmute.
They may not be having, transnational ambitions, but they are supporting militant groups, which are, or helping them, which are spread all over the Central Asia, India, and many other countries, Mr. Zahid, you're saying something?
No,
I don't know. Then it would be very difficult to talk.
Let's agree to
then
disagree
it would be very
and
difficult,
move on, please. So
I think you are the only
disagree.
one who's saying not. The Russians are worried about this. The Chinese are worried, Why China is supporting Taliban, giving help, all sorts of help, hoping that it will not interfere in Xinjiang province. Why Russians are, trying to please Taliban, mainly because they want stability in Afghanistan, and secondly, they don't want, Afghanistan backs the militant groups operating in Russia or Central Asian region. This is the same worry the Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and others are having. We have seen it when they come to the Delhi. We met a lot of their delegates. All of them were worried about Taliban took over Afghanistan's reign. Because it's all of them, and they are on one page with India on this issue. They said, okay, they want peace and stability in Afghanistan, but at the same time, they said, that we want zero tolerance towards militancy. And they also said, that Afghan soil should not be used by any outside militant group to spread militancy across the region or globally or whatever you call it, So they may not be having transnational ambitions, but they certainly supports militant groups all over. Secondly, this concept,
Pervez Saab, please. Pervez Saab, you are on mute. You are on mute.
Razi, I just want to add one more thing, Taliban are basically creation of Pakistan. They come from the madrasas of Pakistan. They are, trained and funded in Pakistan, And secondly, it's a process. They are part of the process, The Talibanization process is Islamization process started by Zahid Hussain time, and that continued, and now the Talibanization process is all over in Pakistan, and they want in the region also. And the whole thesis of strategic depth based on this Islamization process, I would like to listen what Mr. Zahid's comments,
Yes,
because
but
we don't.
We are running out of time, so I would ask Irfan to give his comments now.
I am a collateral damage. Anyway, coming to that, probably I understand his view. He's very close to, he's living in Islamabad and very close to GHQ. So that's why maybe one of the reasons is that his ideas are very influenced by the state in some ways. Zahid Saab, when it comes to the Daesh and it comes to the Taliban, believe you me, I'm a simple man. I'm on the streets. They both are one and the same. Khilafat and Islamic Sharia, they both comes in the form of violence. They don't believe in politics. They don't believe in constitution. They spill innocent blood on the street. Despite their differences, we need to understand that their ideology is the same when it comes to spilling blood on the road. And it's not that one believe in global jihad and another believe in regional jihad. Both kind of jihad comes to the same end, and that is, again, I would say, violence and militancy in this region. And this is one of the reasons that militancy in this region is spreading while militants are being killed on everyday basis, simply because somehow we all are influenced by the ideology of the Islamabad, or GHQ or Pakistani state, where we are made to believe that they have cleared 90% of the area, but leaving the 10% of the area to the Taliban. And when it comes to the 10% of the area, it is the Taliban winning over from Afghanistan to here, to this region. When you say that the Taliban are not here, they are not organized here, they don't have any support here, just come to FATA, see, even in the garb of peace committees, Taliban are giving verdicts. They have courts there. They have organized places there, and they are being accommodated there. They don't have public support, but they do have state support. If you don't see it in Islamabad, you might have developed blinders, but believe you me, here, what we see on the ground is way, way different than what you see there. Coming back to the Indian point, the Indian factor, believe you me, irrespective of different things which is associated with India, I believe that India was having a very positive energy. India brought positive energy here to Afghanistan. Investing $3 billion in a war-hit economy, I think is too much. Building roads, developing different infrastructure in that way, while we consume the state idea that, okay, across the border, Indians consulate are there and they are propagating and they are like sponsoring TTP against Pakistan there. Now come here now, there's no RAW, there is no consulate there. TTP is here, still here. Your state, my state is trying to compromise with the TTP, bring him then to the negotiation table. Why? Simply because the Haqqanis wants them. The Haqqanis wants them there to be very strong in Kabul. Otherwise, then the Mullah Baradar group would overcome them in that sense. So you want to give success story to the Haqqanis there. If Haqqanis cut this deal, that would be like a sign in a sense that it would be a political value for the Haqqanis, which they right now don't have any. The right political value is with the Kandhari group, which you mentioned, and that is Mullah Baradar and the rest. When they were in Doha, they were cutting these political deals with the US. They tried to understand the world, but when they came over here, Kabul is being occupied by the Haqqanis group. And where they are coming from, these Haqqani group, I'm not saying that it's a very hard and fast like divide there, but the divide is still there. Right now, the real challenge of the Taliban is their incapacity to transform their militant strength into a stable political rule. Why it's not happening? Simply because there in Kabul, those who are sitting over there are militant groups. Those who are sitting there in Kandahar is a sort of political groups because they cut the deals in Doha. They are not mixing together. So what is happening right now is again militancy going ahead. We are accepting TTP and it will go beyond and will go to the TLP as well. So you may not accept it, but the Afghan Taliban is getting gradually strategic depth inside Pakistan via the Haqqani network. And this Kandahari Shura is losing turf simply because their main base is Quetta, not Kandahar in that sense. Afghanistan is totally unstable. As long as it's unstable, Taliban will do the Pakistan's bidding in that sense. You may not accept it, but I think part of it is there. You can see in the news coming out every day.
Thank you, Dr. Ashraf. Thank you so much. Pervez Saab.
Yes, I think that Zahid does not like the Taliban at all. I am very sure about that. And he also knows that the Taliban high command has their sons who were suicide bombers, so he's not defending the Taliban. How much time do we have left, Razi Sahab? Have we exceeded the time?
Well, you have half an hour maximum. So be very careful about putting specific questions. Maybe everyone should go for a response for a minute, because giving long responses cuts short the other things. So just 1 minute is good enough for a response if you want to take up many,
Yeah, and Razi bhai, there are a lot of questions lined up.
And then, and then there is the general audience, which is set aside for 20 minutes.
Yes.
So we are going beyond the time.
Should I take the question from the chat then and see if there are specific ones?
So if you think that this is good enough, then what will happen is, our general format is, I hand over to Dr. Zahid Hussain, who is the moderator of the general question answer session. So he will pick up his specific questions, or he will allow specific.
I think that would be a good idea.
Okay. So right now, if you want to conclude, Pervez Saab, for a few minutes, 1-2 minutes, then it will be handed over to Rafat. If you want to conclude, and then the questions, okay?
Okay.
So Rafat Saab is going to read some of the questions. Is that the understanding?
Yes.
I think we should go on to that.
But before that, if you want to conclude,
that will remain unanswered.
Yeah, thank you, Pervez Saab and Razi Saab.
I think Pervez, can I have 1 minute? Actually, then I will leave. Actually, I think probably I thought this will be academic discussion, and I've been covering Afghanistan for a very long time. And I have written books about Taliban and about their atrocities. And somebody has commented, actually, I don't think that that actually is kind of should be used that way. Like, I live in Islamabad, so I have that. And I have known this area. This is my field for a very long time. And I was very disappointed with this comment. And I think actually, one should have more actually try to understand each other rather than actually having a very subjective view about the situation. I tried to analyze the situation more objectively without any setting, and I think probably that's a very inappropriate comment, and I really actually I'm disappointed with this.
Thank you, Zahid Saab. Yeah, that shouldn't be that way.
Thank you for coming. You added value to the discussion.
Yes, you certainly did, and there was. Anyway, so
Rafat, okay, now take over. Okay, please.
Yeah, thank you. So very interesting discussion, and there are a lot of questions also asked by, and there are comments from audience. So I will only give the chance to those who have the questions, not the comments. Comments are readable over the chat box. So there are two options. You can raise your hand, digital hand, or you show your interest in the chat box. So the first person who had a question is Abdul Jabbar Saab.
And Rafat, tell them to be very brief, and the response should be also very brief.
Yeah. So no background, please, because there's so much background discussed already. And please ask the question directly. And if you wanted to ask a particular panelist, that would be fine. Otherwise, one or other will take your question. Thank you. And Abdul Jabbar Saab, please go ahead and ask your question. And I would prefer that you ask your own question, so I don't change it while reading it. So go ahead, Abdul Jabbar Saab. Please unmute yourself. Let me see if he's still there. Yeah, he's there. Okay, in the meantime.
Okay, I got it now. Thank you.
Okay.
Great panel discussion. Like I said, I'm not well versed in Afghanistan's history, long history. But I think recent history, I know a little bit about the US role there for the last 20 years. So I think I just wanted to kind of have some discussion, not too much, why Afghanistan has become, they say, the graveyard of empires. It's a country. It doesn't have a lot of resources. Other empires came for plundering resources, treasures. But how Afghanistan became such a kind of difficult kind of place for empires?
Thank you. Okay. Who wants to, Pervez up, or you choose your panelist?
No, I think other panelists should address this question.
Go ahead.
Please, anyone who wants to say, quickly say.
One thing, I mean, it's a very good question, Afghanistan is basically, it's a geopolitical location. It's such a important country, which connects South Asia with Central Asia, and also with the Central Asia with Middle East, So right from 200 years, the great games are going on there. First, the Britishers wanted to gain control over Afghanistan, fought 3 battles, lost 2, then made, I mean, I don't want to go into history, before that others also, because that was route to India. So that is why also it became very important from there to Punjab, or via invaders used to come to India, or Muslim armies used to come, Mughal period, Mughal or beat, Turk, all of them come from that area to India. So that is why it borders with Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, China, Pakistan, Iran, so many countries, it has a border, If you control, 2 countries are very important in this region. One is Afghanistan and the other one is Iraq. If you control these 2 countries, then you can control the whole of the Middle East, at least the Arab East, Persian Gulf, and Central Asia. So that's why American tried to control these 2 countries, invaded these 2 countries or tried to gain control over these, but they failed in both the places. So that is one reason I believe, I would be very short. I'll take up some of it.
Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so next person is Nazir Ahmed, and after that, Jamshed Ahmed. So please be ready. Nazir Ahmed Saab, please. Unmute yourself, Nazir Saab.
I think Professor Hoodbhoy has answered my question privately. I'll follow up on it. It had to do with a mutual friend, Dr. Iqbal Ahmed, and what he would have to say about the victory of the Taliban in Afghanistan. It would have been a very incisive comment. If Professor Hoodbhoy would like to speculate on it, I'd appreciate it.
You're asking me to substitute for a very great mind. And how can I say how Iqbal Ahmed would have felt about this? I can speculate, but no, I will not commit myself to saying that this is what he thought. But we can do that privately. I've given you my email. Let's be in touch, because he is someone you knew and I revered.
Great, thank you. You saved the time. Jamshed Ahmed Saab.
Hello, hello. This is Jamshed. My question is for Professor Mohibul Haq Sahab, because when he talked about Taliban, I believe, and some of the speakers said that they have no transnational aims. So where do you place this Kashmir in this situation? Where, I mean, do we? There are some speculations in India and in Indian subcontinent that maybe the rise of Taliban in Afghanistan can have an impact in Kashmir. So how do you see that? My question is for Professor Mohibul Haq. Where do you place Kashmir in this whole situation?
When I was talking about the ideological moving, Jamshed Saab, very good question, very pertinent, and of course uncomfortable. Basically, you see that I was talking about the ideological moorings. If you see what kind of indoctrination or motivation has been there for the Taliban fighters, they are fighting for Islam. They are fighting for their country, but at the same time, it is a jihad that they are indulging. So, and this was the reason that the Afghan National Army was not able to fight with them, because they were just doing a kind of duty. They have their children, and here the people, those who are coming to fight against people in Afghan National Army, they were ready to die, and ready to die. और इसमें एक डिस्कोर्स जो होता है ना, जिसमें कहते हैं कि ये अजीब रस्म देखी कि बरोज़े ईद कुर्मा वही ज़िबा भी कर रहे हैं वही ले सवाब उल्टा. This is the reason. So ultimately, if they are not going to support Kashmiri people, especially the Muslims in Kashmir, within Taliban, you will find, keeping in view their ideological moorings, there will be problems, internal contradictions. There will be division. There will be many issues. Their cracks are already there, and these cracks will be widened wherever the people or the Muslims are fighting or struggling, or whatever they are doing for the protection of their rights or whatever. By default they have to support. If they are not supporting within the ranks and files of Taliban, there will be a problem. This is the reason that India is concerned. Why India is concerned? Because Taliban cannot afford to ignore Kashmir. Taliban cannot afford to ignore whatever is happening with Muslims either in Myanmar or other parts of the world. This is the reason that India is concerned, and that is why India has been always expressing this concern that Afghan soil should not be used for aiding and abetting terrorism in India. When we are talking about aiding and abetting terrorism in India, of course, Kashmir is implied, because you will find...
Mohib Sahab, I think you've answered the question from your point of view. I think that there is a practical problem here, because Pashto speakers do not mix very well with Punjabi speakers or those who speak Kashmiri. So that very fact, the cultural differences, really makes the Taliban not a real threat in Kashmir.
One thing can I add?
I think this is your personal comment, and we in India believe, because Taliban has a very deep ties, especially Haqqani network and all others, with Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, and many other organizations. It's just a small comment, because I don't want to take much time. I don't want to contradict you also.
One thing when it comes to the Taliban or to Daesh and others, we forget that there is one element of turf war, and they can fight when it comes to the turf, they can fight over that. But when it comes to the ideology, most of them are like sort of united. For example, Daesh, Khorasan, was based on the splinter groups of the TTP. And TTP is the same group which is now being supported by the Afghan Taliban in that sense. So why there is a turf war between the TTP and Daesh, simply because the Daesh is there in Nangarhar and Kunad. And that was basically a places which earlier was owned by the Haqqani groups in that sense. So I'm not saying that, but part of it is also about the turf war, about the political influence, about the drugs over there, about the black economy over there. So that's how they then support their own foot soldiers into that. So purely it's not about ideology. When it comes to fighting, they're all united in spilling bloods. But when it comes to defenses, so part of it is also about the turf war, about the black economy, about the opium trade there. 90% of the opium trade is being carried out through Afghanistan in that sense. So we should not ignore that as well.
Thank you so much.
Plenty of groups in Pakistan, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, Jaish-e-Mohammed, Hizbul Mujahideen, there are plenty of them to fight India and Kashmir. They don't need the Taliban there.
I think this is what your perception, this is what you think, I don't believe in that, not me, the millions of people don't believe,
Let's go ahead.
Yeah. So
I don't want to, I don't want to be this
that's
personal,
fine. So Pervez Saab, there are 6 more people lined up. So let's give them a chance. Dr. Syed Zadi, after that Kaisar Naqvi and Mohsin Syed. Syed Saab, Dr. Zadi, please.
So good discussion. I have 2 questions. They are both interlinked. First, we talk about Afghanistan a great deal, but the main player was US, and US has been defeated. So the question is, of course, Pakistan was instrumental in the whole thing. So US is kind of mad with Pakistan and of course disappointed in Afghanistan. What will be the US in next short-term and long-term actions will be? And second question is, since Imran Khan directly or indirectly helped this whole Taliban victory, is Pakistan or / Imran Khan is safer now than they were before?
Thank you, Dr. Zadi. Okay, so role of US role in this, who wants to tackle? Pervez Saab, point out, please.
I have lost my internet. I couldn't hear the question. I'm sorry, I lost the question.
So
I think that I can respond to that. There is a misconception.
It's a very interesting question. Yes, go ahead.
The US has gone from the region. I think US hasn't gone there. The US drones are still hovering there on Afghanistan. They are very much closer to us. They are in the Indian Sea there. They are in Digo Garcia. They are in Kazakhstan here. So what I'm just saying is that the US is a huge diplomatic giant in that sense. It's not coming to the help of Afghanistan. Look, see what is happening right over there. US has freezed $9.5 billion in that sense of the Afghan state bank money. And there is a catastrophe almost over there in Afghanistan. So what I'm just saying is that US is there. It's there. It's influencing the politics in so many ways. Yes, it will not push the stakeholders here to the extent where it would be meaningful right now. But I'm thinking that probably within a year, US is having an eye on the Daesh particularly. And we would see what is happening. They already have indicated that drone war is on the horizon.
Okay.
Now, the second question about Pakistan and Imran Khan, please.
I think Agha Sahab, please be brief on that. And the question people who are
Pakistan is in a big dilemma, at the moment. Pakistan has supported Taliban. Pakistan is with Taliban. But the worry is there in Pakistan, what would happen if Pashtun nationalism grows. It will cross the Durand line, number one. Number two, the bigger problem which Pakistan is facing is that the traditional ruling elite is now taken over by the mullahs in Pakistan. And look, now the writ of mullahs are running in Pakistan. We have seen what has happened in Taliban. The government was forced to negotiate with the TTP, and then it was forced to release Tehreek-e-Labbaik officials and their supporters from jail. And it looks, but the Talibanization process is going on in Pakistan at a very big scale. This was the process which was started by Ziaul Haq. It is now reaching its peak. Even this Talibani mindset, is there within the Pakistani army also, and that's why I think Imran Khan was forced to negotiate with TTP as well as with the other side. There are two warring groups have emerged. One is Tehreek-e-Taliban. The other one is Tehreek-e-Labbaik. Both are very powerful, and they have big support, and they have different ideologies. So Imran Khan will have to confront both in coming times. But the one thing I believe, that the mullahs are having an upper hand in Pakistan. The traditional ruling elite is sidelined at the moment. I don't know.
Thank you, Agha Sahab. Thank you, Agha Sahab. The next person is Faisal.
Just add on to that a little bit. I don't know if you can hear me.
No, go ahead, please.
Imran Khan doesn't have to confront the Taliban or the TLP. Those are his own people. He is very comfortable with them. He is very uncomfortable with liberal people. And he has made this clear time and time again, and in every speech of his. apart from those speeches which are intended for the international community. For people here in Pakistan, Imran Khan is with the Taliban and with the TLP.
Taliban Khan.
He is
Thank
Taliban
you.
Khan.
So,
And from inside. He is from inside.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on. Qaisar Naqvi Saab, and after that, Ishrat Aziz Saab. So let's hear Qaisar Naqvi Saab, please. Be brief, and I ask the panelists or request the panelists to speak as well. Qaisar Saab, go ahead.
Pervez Saab, can you hear me? Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me, Pervez Saab?
Yes.
Yes, I can hear you. My
Hello,
internet
can you hear me?
goes. It comes and goes.
Okay.
The internet comes and goes.
Please go ahead.
My question is from either Pervez Saab or Dr. Irfan. Number one is that Dr. Irfan, can you hear me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yes. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yeah, I can hear you.
Dr. Irfan, can you hear me?
Go ahead, sir. Go ahead, please.
I think the screen is frozen, so I don't think...
I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear you.
Hello.
Hassan Naqvi Saab is not audible.
Yeah, Rafat, please move on.
Rafat, in such situation, you should just
we will come
mute
back
him and move to other. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
You are right. So Qaisar Saab is frozen, I think. So it's
Hello.
Let's move on. Ishrat Aziz Saab, please go ahead.
Yes, my question is very strange. And anyway, I'm sort of heretic as far as thinking and views are concerned. So let me ask a very heretical question. You know, whenever I ask 10 people, 20 people, should the country follow its self-interest, national interest? They all agree. And then I put the next question. So can you tell me what is the country's self-interest? And I tell you, I never met two people who agreed on what is the national interest in specific. So this is a question I'm directing at Pervez Sahib, but anybody else is free to answer. In South Asia, can you name one country about which you can say it is really following its self-interest?
Okay, Pervez Saab, that question was directed to you first because I saw
I just got on. Can you repeat the question? I was disconnected until now.
Yeah, I saw that.
Repeat the question.
I can respond to that.
Ishrat Bhai, you are muted. Ishrat Bhai, you
I'm
are
new to this.
Yeah.
No, my question was, when I ask a group of people that should the country follow its self-interest, they all unanimously say, yes, the country must follow its national interest, its self-interest. But when I say, what is the country's self-interest and national interest, I don't find two people agreeing in specifics. I ask this question because again and again, countries with very intelligent group of advisors and thinkers, they say this is the self-interest. They go into Vietnam or they go into Afghanistan. Of course, two superpowers have been there in the name of self-interest and they come out having lost. So that's why I asked this question. What is a nation's self-interest? And can in South Asia, you can name one country which you think is really following its self-interest very wisely. Thank you.
Okay. National self-interest is defined by the group that has monopoly over power in that country. It is not necessarily that which is in the best interest of its people, but that group of persons who hold political and military power. So in the case of Pakistan, it is the military which defines the national interest of Pakistan. And so that national interest was and is that Kashmir becomes part of Pakistan, that Afghanistan becomes a client state, etc., etc. Is there one country in which the national interests and that of the ruling party are the same? I think yes, in a genuinely democratic system that would be. So if you look at the Scandinavian countries, that's where I think the two are one and the same thing. But in a lot of other places, that is not so.
Okay, thank you. Move on. Mohd Syed, please. And then Hassan Ghias Saab. So Mohd Syed Saab. Let me see if he is still there. No, I don't see him. Next person is Hassan Ghias Saab.
Is there a likely role for Turkey in this puzzle?
Okay.
Very
good. Thank you so much.
That's a great question. But right now, Turkey doesn't have much of an influence in Afghanistan. In fact, the Taliban did not even allow them to control the airport during the flights out. Furthermore, Turkey does not have that kind of outreach, and particularly with its economic difficulties, I don't see that it will become a major supplier of food, of necessities to Afghanistan. And in fact, even in the case of Pakistan, even though there is a lot of ideological confluence between Erdogan and Imran Khan, yet there is no substantial economic linkage between Turkey and Pakistan. So it's not a big player. It is, I think, a much bigger player in the Middle East, but not in Afghanistan.
Okay, thank you, Pervez Saab. Abdul Nazim Saab, and after that, Kamran. So Nazim Saab, please.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. I am a student of Professor Mohibul Haq Saab from Aligarh Muslim University, a student of political science. I want to ask a question to every panelist, especially to Qamar Agha Saab, that everyone is saying that the Taliban came to power, and the lot of Afghans do not support the Taliban. The majority of Afghans actually are against them. But how come they managed to come to power? I don't understand how when all the world countries, the superpowers, the NATO forces, the 3 lakh strong Afghan army is against the Taliban regime. Then how could a 1,000 poorly equipped, poorly trained, or not well versed in modern equipment and technology could overwhelm a 3 lakh force which is trained by the U.S. Army and other modern armies of the world, and I think that this is impossible without public support. So I think we are missing some. We are missing the public support that the Taliban enjoys among the Afghan public. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Nazim Saab. Agha Saab.
Yeah, there's one thing, it's a very big question, but anyway, I'll try to be very brief. Taliban came to power mainly because, they made a deal with Americans. Americans have virtually handed over Afghanistan to them. Secondly, Afghan army was not a fully trained army. Americans have not trained Afghan army very well. Same thing they have done in Iraq also. Iraqi army was also failed when Daesh came in Afghanistan. So both the armies, they were just like a police force. They were not fully equipped. Army was totally dependent on American forces or for logistic support or for intelligence input, and everything was managed by the Americans or their private contractors. They were dependent on them, so they couldn't resist, they couldn't fight. Thirdly, army was there was no central command, because that was also disrupted. 3-4 months. They were not even receiving proper salaries for the last 3-4 months. The number of factors, I can go on and on, you know. Secondly, I just want to tell, when Taliban came to power, almost 1 million people are migrating, and many more are waiting to go outside the country. They are just leaving, the school teachers or engineers or doctors or or from different sections of society. They are just leaving. Everybody wants to go out of the country because they see a civil war is coming. They perceive, you know, instability is growing. I mean, virtually the country is collapsing from inside. So, I mean, it was the Americans, you know, they first made a deal with Pakistan and then later talked to Afghanistan. Pakistan helped Taliban to reach some agreement, and that's how they came to power. Through, I mean, we know what was President Ghani was doing, the way he handled the whole situation in the last month, and all these things. You know, I just wanted to give you some brief here and there because it's a big question. We can debate for longer times.
Thank you, Agha.
Just a quick response.
Yeah, can I say something about that?
So the Americans were seen by a big section of the Afghan population as invaders who had no right to be there. And this is what the Afghan capitalized upon, the Taliban capitalized upon. Secondly, there was open and visible corruption in the Karzai and in the Ashraf Ghani administrations. And it was so much there that anyone could point to it and say, get them out of here. And one very important thing was the Americans began nation building much too late. They got distracted by the Iraq war, which was totally unnecessary. And this is really what doomed Afghanistan. If they had begun nation building way back earlier, it could have worked. It could have worked much better than how it ultimately turned out to be.
I just want to add one sentence. Afghanistan, you know, Afghans were not happy with the government in power, you know, be it Karzai or later Ghani's government, but they never wanted the government to be replaced by Taliban. They wanted the system to continue, the democratic setup to remain there. The second thing, Americans have, that is true, you rightly said, Americans have not invested in institution building either way. You know, Americans were doubtful about democratic institution, being democracy in American beliefs, you know, that Muslims don't want democratic setup. They ultimately, you know, they never declared Taliban as a terrorist organization. They wanted to withdraw in 2008 when, in fact, but at that time, you know, Pakistan was not agreeing to their terms and conditions. So they waited, they withdraw, but remained there in Afghanistan for a longer period of time till that. So therefore, you know, they were keep talking to the Pakistani all through. And when the Pakistani, and that is why, you know, and Pakistan was at that time was totally aligning itself with China. That was the major worry. Americans never wanted Pakistan to go on China way altogether. They put Pakistan on Financial Action Task Force. Now they are forcing Pakistanis to deal with Americans on their terms, you know. So now Pakistan is in dilemma. If one side is China, the other side is Pakistan, other side is United States, you know. So trying to involve in a balancing act, you know, they're trying to please both, and which is a very difficult thing. I think Imran Khan is not capable of handling such a situation.
Thank you, Agha Saab. Last two people by the name Farishta or Farishta, please unmute yourself. And last person is Khadim Hussain. Farishta, let me see if he's here.
And Rafat, keep in mind, Irfan Saab wanted to respond. So this time the question should be directed to him.
Okay. So I don't see Farishta Saab or Saiba, whoever. Khadim Hussain. Khadim Hussain Saab, let's see.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, we can.
Thank you so much, sir, for the opportunity. My question is to Qamar Agha sahab, sir. As we know that Shia community has been a very vulnerable community in countries like Afghanistan and Pakistan. And my question is that in the current ruling Taliban regime, how do you see the situation of Shia in this country, sir? Thank you so much.
I think Pervez Saab would be better to reply this question. Shias are in minority there. Hazara Iranians are supporting them, and I don't know. I mean, Pervez Saab would be better.
Well, Iran has managed to get some kind of operandi with them, and so the Taliban are not that viciously anti-Shia as they were earlier. So there has been some moderation there. But of course, the Shias will be a very embattled minority inside Afghanistan.
Okay. Anyone wants to add something? Or
I think Amir Bhai should ask a question to Irfan sir.
Okay. Syed Amir sir.
I wasn't really prepared to ask any question, but since I am invited, I will ask a question which has intrigued me a while. It seems that all these tahriks, Jasn-e-Muhammad and Tahrik Labbaik and all that, they seem to originate in Punjab and small area in Punjab, southern Punjab. So Sindh, frontier province, Balochistan, they all seem to be quiescent. So what is there so much in the soil of southern Punjab which promotes the growth of these extremist organizations?
I think part of it will, Dr. Pervez would respond, but part of it, I will connect it to the earlier question. Sometime when we are so much, when we feel about these militant groups, we believe that probably they are having public support. But I think that we should not ignore the networking, the organizational networking of these organizations like all over the region. And the 40, 50 years of war, particularly in the Pashtun region, the imperialism like supporting this war. And later on, see when the Afghan Taliban came, when they were fighting against the Americans inside Afghanistan, they were supported by the regional states. Iran supported them, Russia supported them, Pakistan supported them. We should not ignore the fact that why these powers were supporting them there. These powers can accept Afghanistan to get destabilized, but they will never accept Afghanistan as a democratic, stable country or state in that sense, because these countries have stakes. They don't want democracy in this region in that sense. If we can see that nation building is one thing, Americans, as I would agree with Pervez Saab, that Americans came to this idea of nation building quite later, and even Biden then said that our purpose was not nation building. But their purpose was nation building, but they realized that having Iran as a neighbor, having Pakistan as a neighbor, having like Central Asian states, all dictatorships are there, and Russia, they were supporting all these Afghan Taliban. So I think stable Afghanistan is not in the interest of the regional states, and the organizational networks of the Taliban in this region then further reinforce this argument. So saying this, that the Afghan Taliban have public support, I don't agree with this. Had it been the case, Afghans would still have been there in Afghanistan. They would not have been fleeing from this region.
Thank you. So my apology that Farishta Saab is back and she wants me to read the question. Is the orthodox behavior of Taliban, especially towards women, not a hindrance for women of other South Asian countries?
Well, I think Bina made this quite clear at the beginning, the difficulties which are being faced by Afghan women and even how girls are not being allowed back into school. That's a fact, and it's a terrible fact. I don't see the Taliban improving their treatment of women because they are steeped into that kind of religious ideology.
So does that affect the other South Asian countries? That's the question.
It affects us. We've talked about that. It affects Pakistan more than any other country because we have a common border and a common ethnic population, and the effects of Talibanization are already spreading through Imran Khan now effectively being their foreign minister, their ambassador to the world. And I see that the general jubilation that we see in right-wing groups, right-wing religious groups, this is empowering them, it is giving them great moral support. And so, yes, there is a very direct effect upon us.
The question is about the woman.
Yeah, can I add something?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think that this question is very interesting, but why we should not ignore that in Afghanistan, militants from all over the world are there. You just name it, like Central Asian states, like China, like Pakistan. All these militants are there, and when they are fighting there, they are fighting there for a cause which is not just restricted to Afghanistan. So anything happening in Afghanistan will be having a ripple effect, and it will surely be affecting all these neighboring countries. And just to add to one thing, earlier somebody said that the India will not be getting affected. India will surely be affected to a large extent. India is the only democratic country, whatever you may disagree with that democracy, but that is the only democratic country in that way that this region left. So I think we should be worried about the Afghan Taliban here, and we cannot just disconnect it from the region in that sense.
So on that point, may I ask Professor Mohibul Haq whether India will be really, or women of India will be affected by that?
You see, Taliban is not only a militia, but Taliban is also an idea. And when we see Taliban as an idea, as a movement, as a narrative, then in this narrative, subjugation of women is something that is considered or that is perceived by them as Islamic. So, you know, that strict Sharia means weaning women, they should not show their face, even, you know, जिसे कहते हैं कि आवाज का भी पर्दा है. So ultimately, this kind of narrative, when that is developed, then the Muslim community, you know, to a large extent in India or all over the world, they will be having, you know, some kind of effect. And especially people are thinking that God is with them, and that is why they have been able to defeat two superpowers, Afghanis. And it was only because of you know, their adherence to Islam, you know, they have been able to defeat. When this kind of interpretation is there, you can understand that the people going to accept that particular kind of narrative, and there may be a smaller groups, you know, the movements supporting for the subjugation of women that I'm seeing, you know, from in various parts of India, that all we have become seen, women are not doing parda, or women are not doing as you know, Muslims should do. So that is why all this is happening with the Muslims. So that narrative, a very strong narrative, is already there, and Taliban reinforces it.
Thank you. Agha Saab, we give you the chance. Razi Bhai, Pervez Saab is about to leave. So if you want to say something, thank him.
So Agha Saab and Pervez Saab, it is about time. This is quite late for you guys in India and Pakistan. Briefly, just for half a minute, if you want to say anything, 1 minute, or you know, just to conclude it.
You see, I just want to add, say one thing. You know, the pro-democracy movement is gaining ground among most of the Muslim countries now, barring South Asia, because of Taliban victory or because of what Mohib has said. You know, partly true. You know, I support him. You know, but if you look at Algeria, Tunisia, or even in the entire Sahel region, or for that matter, you know, in other countries, you know, you would see more people want, you know, people now, let's come back to further cut short, you know, they don't want, now many people are not joining Daesh. Earlier, you know, we used to see large number of Europeans, Muslims living in Europe and America, they're coming and joining them, or from within the Arab countries were joining them. Now we don't see that pattern. So democratic forces are gaining ground in number of countries, but the military-backed governments in these countries are not allowing them. They are suppressing them, and they have the support of the Western powers as well as. So that is a problem, you know. Arab Spring was failed, but again, you know, it is being revived in Sudan. We have seen what is happening, you know. It's an eye-opener, the way they have come out on the street against the army. Similarly, in other countries, same pattern is there. You know, some places it is hidden because there are too strong military administration are not allowing them. But South Asia is a different story.
All right. Can I ask a question, Pervez?
I have to leave. So let me just say goodbye. And I wish I could.
Thank you very much. You know, it was very interesting, Pervez.
All right.
Well, Qamar Sahab, I agree with you that in many places in the world there is liberalization which is taking place. Sadly, this is not true for Pakistan.
Yeah, the South Asia.
What is happening is absolutely incredible. In fact, we are seeing across Punjab now the Quran being forced as onto children. There are magistrates, there are judges which are going from school to school, seeing if the Quran is being taught properly over there, as Imran Khan wants them to be taught. And we are seeing now for the first time the emergence of people who have only one agenda, which is that of enforcing blasphemy, coming to the very forefront of power. So wish us good luck. I know things are bad in India, but they're going to get very bad in Pakistan. So wish us good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pervez साहब.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
जी, तो चलिए बहुत अच्छा आज का डिस्कशन रहा. ये आप लोगों के लिए जरा सा एक अनाउंसमेंट है. फर्स्ट टाइम now we are going to ask for some kind of financial contribution for an event, for a specific event. And this is going to be a very good event, Delhi ka Tarikhi Mushaira, since we need a lot of clothes and stage rehearsal and some payment for the artists. So please, whosoever wants to contribute to us, either to Mirza Faisal Beg or to us. And hopefully by the end of January, we will be doing this in regular Danish Iqbal's event. And the next one, Faisal, is our next event, which is going to be really a remarkable, another talk, because it is coming from by Professor Francis Pritchett, considered as, I think, the foremost scholar on Ghalib in the entire world, or at least in the Western world. And she will be introduced by Professor Meher Afshar Faruqi, and will be welcomed by Mozam Siddiqui Saab. So please join us next week. It has been long discussion. Hopefully you all enjoyed it. And now it is over. If you want to chat